I have some comments to make. The first thing is the world has changed. When I graduated from Princeton, I was the median person who graduated in my cadre. And I graduated 3.5 years. I was not fast, but everybody was graduating in that time period. And then we all went on to a university with no postdocs. The world has changed, okay? And I basically had my oral exam on Thursday, and I got here Friday evening, and I wanted to go into the ChemE building, and I went over there, and it was locked. And so I had to wait. And then that Monday, classes started. So they didn't have any vacation at that time. The first course that I taught on my own, what they did back then was I was assigned to a recitation. And so I worked with the people on a recitation. Then for the first course I taught on my own, I got my ratings from the students, and they were mediocre. They weren't bad, but they weren't good. And let me adjust that. Okay. So I decided I needed an education course. And I found an education course that was actually one of the pioneering courses in how to teach for educators. It was taught by John Feldhusen, and he was in educational psychology. And I suddenly found out I didn't have to lecture. There were other things that you could do. And after that, I later went and got a master's degree in education, which is now encouraged by Purdue. At that time, when I signed up for the master's, the answer was no, from the dean of the grad school. And so I got lined up my ducks in a row. I had the head of ChemE and the dean in favor of this, and the dean of the grad school punted and passed it up to the provost, who was trapped. The provost could not say that it was not helpful to take education classes. And he could not say this was not useful for the students. And I already had tenure. So he sent me a letter saying, you're allowed to do this, but this is not a precedent. And of course, Purdue later changed and now encouraged this. They were worried too many professors would do this. They had no idea the amount of work it took. Okay? The only reason that I was able to do this is I wasn't married at the time. And I had no children. And therefore, I had time to do things like that. So anyway, I got the degree and then decided that it was time to give back, and that's when we started the teaching engineering class. And the interesting thing that I remember about the electrical engineering students that were in there is about 1/3 of them were not signed up for the course. And they told me, I can't tell my major professor I'm taking this course because he would not let me do it. It was always a he, too. It wasn't a she. And so we did that. And later on, I decided that a book was needed. And Frank Orovitz and I sent in a proposal to NSF, and they actually paid us to write the book, which was very nice of them. I also had a comment about Sang's comment about my lecture. I remember that lecture, but not the same way Sang remembers it. I'm going to have to walk away from the microphone, okay? I like to wave my hands. I had a pointer in my hand, and I had a fairly loose sweater, and halfway through, the pointer went through the sweater.
I wasn't going to mention that.
That's what I remember about that talk. And the other thing on the paper, that I think the paper that he was referring to was the fastest paper I ever did, in the sense that I had I noticed that there was a missing link in the research that was done by Professor Wilhelm and then Professor Swede after him. And I filled in that link, and from the time I started working on this until I had the paper submitted was a week. That's by far the fastest I've ever done. And it was really good paper. It just flowed out. Okay, forming engineering education. I was the interim associate dean. I was also head of the division of interdisciplinary engineering studies. And as interim associate dean, I was put on the committee that was going to form E&E. And I sat on this committee, and they had absolutely no plan to have an undergraduate program. Programs without an undergraduate program are not stable. You need the undergraduates for stability. And I sat there and I realized that we could use this because we did not have an accredited program because I had no faculty. And if we became part of engineering education, we would have a faculty and we could become accredited. And I was getting every year, 2 or 3 of my alums were telling me they couldn't become professional engineers. And so there was a certain amount of pressure. And I sat on this for about 3 weeks until I decided, well, we're going to give up our independence and go in with E&E. And so I talked to Dean Katay, and I told her, don't give the committee the assignment to do this. Just tell them that they can include an undergraduate program in their discussions. And then I didn't mention it. They came up with it by themselves, and I agreed. And so they did it. And then I went to talk to Kamyar Haghighi, and Kamyar's comment just stunned me. He said, I don't think I want to do that. I said, why don't you want to do that? He said, well, I can see what it is. You're just pushing me out of the way, and you're going to take over. And I said, no. I don't want to be the head of the department. I've already done that. I'm done with that. I want to run the undergraduate program, and you be the head. And at that point, he became very enthusiastic, and we worked very well together as a team. And unfortunately, of course, he came up with Lou Gehrig's disease and passed away. But I have a hard time with this. That Kamyar had the vision for E&E that I never had. I had the vision for what to do with the undergraduate program, but Kamyar really had the vision for the entire school. Anyway, so time goes by. And I remember better what happened 47 years ago. When I came in, I thought I'd be at Purdue for 2 or 3 years. And here I am. And it really does, as Chris says, it seems like it was only a week ago. It wasn't yesterday, but maybe a week ago or a year ago, and it's been a good run. So I'm looking forward to what happens next, which I think will be a good run. And I would like to thank my family. I would like to add one thing. Before we went downstairs, every night I did the dishes. You understand that when we got married, I like to eat, but I don't like to cook. So we made an agreement that Dot would cook and I would do the dishes. And we've done that ever since we got married.